Hey guys, Anders here. Welcome back to another video. So I've made many videos going over the best weapons setups for the actual infantry weapons in the game, but I don't think I've ever done a video going over the best vehicle setups in the game. And as there have been many vehicle additions to Battlefield 2042, I figured now would be a pretty decent time. For the vehicles I don't have really any playtime in, I went ahead and asked the best vehicle players pretty much in the game for their knowledge regarding these. So I do definitely think I have the best vehicle setups, and I'll go over the different use case scenarios and just what to think about, maybe to switch some attachments mid-play, stuff like that. As always, thank you so much for all support this month. If you enjoyed the content, hit the like button, and of course subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for hitting 37,500 subs and joining the Discord so much. Really appreciate it. Link is in the description, and of course I stream every single day at twitch.tv/enders. So first and foremost, we're going to go over the transport vehicles here, and as I am not a complete degenerate, I don't actually have the LATV-4 Recon fully unlocked because I don't sit on the hill and spam people with the 30mm cannon like some people do in-game. Anyway, what you're going to want to use here is definitely the thermal smoke package over the smoke discharger. It's just a flat upgrade, period. For equipment slot 2, detection pulse versus repair systems, kind of like a playstyle thing. If you're not sitting on the hill using the cannons for this thing, I would run the detection pulse. If you are doing that and you'd like to, get some long range kills, use a repair system. For the weapon station, I'd say 30mm cannon or 50mm cannon. 50mm cannon is going to be way more effective against vehicles. 30mm cannon is going to be way more effective against infantry, even though it still does a decent amount of damage to vehicles, just not as much as the 50mm cannon. So that is how I would run that for sure. Moving over to a very controversial vehicle, the AA gun of this game, or perhaps anti-everything gun, as all AA guns are in Battlefield, the Wildcat. So a while ago, the 30mm AA cannons got a change to them, which made them drastically more effective. So if you're running this in a pure AA role, I would use the dual 30mm cannons, anti-aircraft missiles, thermal smoke package. For the weapon station, I would use heavy machine gun because this is actually deceptively effective at damaging vehicles as well. And for the weapon pod, I would use the flak pod if you're running it in a pure AA setup. Now, if you're running like more general use case, I would use 40mm cannon. Pick and choose between these. Do you want AA missiles? Do you not? If you're using the 40mm cannon, I would probably stay with AA missiles. Use thermal smoke package still in repair system. Keep in mind that later on, the main battle tanks as well as the EBAA will probably receive APS. So in that event, I would use APS over the repair system here. But of course, that update hasn't come yet. So use a repair system for now. For the weapon station, if you're running the 40mm cannon, again, I would use the heavy machine gun. And you can try to use the mortar pod. The mortar pod is ridiculously busted. It's basically like the HE shell, but a little more finicky to use. So that's crazy. Another crazy weapon pod that you can use, especially if you're just like drive-bying people in this thing constantly. 40mm canister shot pod is kind of crazy because it's a shotgun. Also the kinetic grenade pod. So there's a lot of things you can mess around here. A lot of different play styles. This is basically like a personal preference slot in my opinion. Moving over to the MAV, aka the Jawa Sandcrawler, right? Because that's what it is. Look at it. Thermal smoke package, just going to be a flat upgrade over both of these two. Make sure you're running repair system as that. I don't think that's equipped by default. For the weapon station, you don't have any choice. Weapon station 2, you do though. Use the 50mm cannon. I just think it's generally the most effective pick here over the tow missile and the barrage missile. I do think the tow missile does more like damage though than the 50mm cannon. If you're running like a pure anti-vehicle setup for the MAV, you really want to push those tanks back to try to get space. Maybe you would use the tow missile. For the weapon pod, again, the 60mm mortar is just ridiculous right now. I think this is probably just the outright best pick. But again, you can probably mess around with the kinetic grenade pod or maybe even the canister pod. Personal preference pick here. For the RAM is really interesting. I run it in sort of a hit and run setup. I like going in with the howitzer cannon real fast. I pop my APS and then I just get in, get a bunch of kills and then leave. Then I continue that cycle. I really like running this setup. Howitzer, heavy machine gun, active protection system, and then of course you have the spawn beacon. For the weapon station, heavy machine gun, I just think is generally the most effective. This is actually just a permanent seat. You can't change anything. For the weapon pod, I would probably say the canister pod is the best right now. The flak pod kind of got nerfed, But if you're dealing with helicopters or maybe just an air vehicle in general that's annoying you, you might want to equip that, as it is very effective still. And the volley pod, kind of interesting. I don't know. It's kind of finicky. I would just use the canister shot pod or the flak pod. Now, if you want to run something else, the missile launcher is great against vehicles, especially from long range, as the missiles don't really have that much drop. And the 40mm cannon is going to be your kind of all-purpose thing. So that's how I would think about that. Hovercraft, thermal smoke package. Make sure you have the repair system equipped here. This is not equipped by default. The weapon station, I would just say use the minigun. However, you can kind of use the hovercraft as a mobile tow missile thing and just irritate tanks from across the map, which I find to be pretty funny. So that's an idea. For the Nightbird, the Nightbird is one of the few vehicles in this game where I would say there's like a specific sort of skill loadout. If you're an extremely talented pilot, the miniguns are just flat out better than the mounted 20mm cannons. And the air-to-ground missile is flat out better than the personnel rockets, because you're going to be able to kill all the infantry you need with just the miniguns. You won't actually need the rocket packs. If you find you need a little more help killing infantry, you can use the anti-vehicle rockets. But I would say stick to air-to-grounds and just practice your minigun aim, because the miniguns, as they currently are right now, are actually very good. Moving on to the Bolt. Again, thermal smoke package. Missile launcher is really weird. It's very finicky to use. I don't find it to be that effective, so I would just go with a countermeasure instead. And for equipment slot 2, I would choose between repair system or cluster mine layer. You can make an argument for anti-tank mine layer if you're maybe driving in front of a tank and you want them to drive into the mines. I've actually done that a couple times. So it just depends, right? Like, what do you want? What are you going to play like? This is kind of a play style pick. But the weapon station, I think it's no-brainer. 30mm cannon has always just been the best pick on this thing. It's absolutely insane. And now to the strongest tank ever added to a Battlefield game, the Railgun Tank. If you want a vehicle to die, this is the vehicle for you. This thing is just generally the most effective tank ever added to a Battlefield game. It'll 2 or 3 shot pretty much any other vehicle in the entire game, except for maybe the MAV. That is, I think, the only thing in the game that might be able to tank 4 shots. I think the hammer is generally the better cannon. However, if you really want something to die, the Maul is going to be your best bet here. I think it 2 shots a super hind. And remember, guys, it's pretty much hit scan from across the map. It'll 1-shot attack helicopters. It'll 1-shot scout helis. It'll 1-shot stealth helicopters. It'll 2 or 3-shot MBTs. It's just absolutely ridiculous. For the secondary weapons, I like the heavy machine gun. Run thermal smoke. Of course, use APS. For the weapons station, I would run heavy machine gun. I don't actually have that. But yeah, that's how I'd run that. It's just generally a ridiculous tank. I would play farther back with this, obviously. Use it like a sniper tank. Now, moving on to a bunch of different vehicles. I'm not going to go over each and every single one. So just remember, like, this is the attack heli, and the Apache loadout is the same as the Super Hokum. The Condor is the same as the Super Hind. The Huron is the same as the Hannibal. The M1A5 is the same as the T-28. And the Panther is the same as the Felon, right? So just keep that in mind as I go over this stuff. For the Apache, there is one distinct difference between the Apache and the Super Hokum. The Super Hokum has the option to use a 30mm cannon, and the Apache does not. So just keep that in mind. For the Apache, I like using the 127mm anti-vehicle rocket packs. I don't find that these are ineffective against infantry. I think they're actually quite good against infantry and vehicles, so I think that's a great all-around pick. For your secondary weapons, it depends on what's happening in the game, right? If you find that you're encountering a bunch of air threats, use heat seekers. If you find you're encountering a bunch of ground targets, but you don't have the, maybe you're not as good as using the tow missile, use the air-to-ground missile. If you're a very skilled pilot and you want to style on people and you're an ego gamer, right, use the wire-guided missile. Pretty simple. Make sure you have the repair system equipped. That's about it for that. For the Condor, pretty straightforward. This goes for the Super Hind as well. Make sure you have the repair system equipped, as well as the 40mm grenade launcher. Unfortunately, the 50mm cannon, rest in peace. It was gutted pretty heavily, so I would not recommend using it anymore. RIP the 50mm cannon. Got that thing nerfed myself, I think. For the stealth heli, I would use the 30mm cannon pods just for general use case. However, the heavy machine gun pods on this thing actually are pretty insane if you're good at aiming. I prefer the 30mm cannon pods though. I think it's just a grief weapon, just incredibly effective. Same thing kind of applies to the stealth heli. What's going on in the game? Are you facing air threats? Are you facing ground threats? You know, one thing I will say for the stealth heli though, I don't think you ever need to run the air-to-ground missile because you already have HE bombs that are constantly accessible. I would run either heat seekers or the tow missile. I would not ever use air-to-ground missiles on the stealth heli personally. Moving on to the jet, I spoke to Silk. Some of you might know he has like a big YouTube channel. He's a very good pilot, one of the best in the game for sure. He told me that the 25mm cannons are the way to go on the jets, and definitely use air-to-ground missiles. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Just make sure you have that repair system equipped as well. Jets have pretty sparse customization. Now, for the last vehicle here, the main battle tanks. It's pretty interesting. The main battle tanks have definitely more customization than you might think, or more situations that you might want to switch between than you might think. The MPAT shell for general use case is the thing you're going to want to use all the time. However, if you're in a team and you're fighting with multiple people in your squad, you can make a case for the HE shell, but just run the tow missile if you're using the HE shell, so your teammate can help you in tank versus tank fights. But in general, use the MPAT shell. It's not going to have that same massive explosive radius as the HE shell, because the HE shell is more for like infantry farming. But just in general, use the MPAT. Use the heavy machine gun, thermal smoke package. And for equipment slot 2, remember the tanks are going to get APS. So use repair system until they get APS. That is what I would recommend. The weapon station, if you're not really, playing with a bunch of people, you can't coordinate anything, just use the heavy machine gun. If you are running in a team, you could make a case for using the tow missile if you're fighting a bunch of armor, just for that big burst damage. You can do like, 40, 50 damage to a tank just off the bat in an instant. Just basically hard win tank fights. The weapon pod, I like using the 60mm mortar. I just think it's ridiculous. You go in close quarters, this thing one-shots any infantry that's near you. Very good. And yeah, that is how I would set up all the vehicles in Battlefield 2042. And don't forget, of course, ladies and gentlemen, get your skin game up, obviously. As we all know, if you have a cool skin, that means you have more health, obviously. So just make sure that you have your skins equipped. Now, that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and of course, subscribe to the channel. I stream every single day at twitch.tv/enders. Link is in the description, and comment down below what is your favorite vehicle to use in Battlefield 2042. Hope you guys found this useful, and I'll see you guys in the next one.